Some teachings were never meant for paper. They travel mouth to ear. One cold evening in Samarkand, a court scribe named Idris crossed the bazaar with a satchel of scrolls, law, astronomy, logic. He found an old waxmaker by a brazier, hands stained with soot, eyes calm. "Tell me," Idris said, "what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom?" The waxmaker dipped a reed in wax and held it over the coals. "Knowledge can explain this heat," he said. "It can write 100 pages on fire." Then he moved the smoking reed toward Idris' wrist. Idris flinched. The old man smiled. "Wisdom is the sense that steps back before pain teaches it. That recoil is our age. We were drowning in information and starving for inner direction. We can build machines that think, yet we can to stop repeating old habits. Tonight we trace 4 stations of intelligence, the makamat of the soul, and the Jungian path to wholeness. Not self-help, self-unearthing. If this finds you now, the work has begun. In the libraries of Old Merv and Nishapur, the mystics weren't arguing about God. They were studying the human instrument that tries to know God. They said the modern mistake is simple. We crowned one faculty and called it the whole king. The West trained us to worship Aql, the slicing mind. Useful, brilliant, and dangerously arrogant. Aql can measure a planet's orbit, yet it can measure the hunger that makes you sabotage your own life. Sufi psychology mapped 4 rising intelligences, like stages inside an alchemical flask. Aql, rational discrimination, the blade. Call, the heart, is knowing. The mirror. Ruh, the spirit's perception, the breath beyond me. Sirr, the secret, where seeker and sought collapse. Centuries later, Jung's found the same architecture by another door. He called it individuation, the slow integration of shadow, anonymous, and the self. Different language, same terrain. And the terrain begins where your certainty starts to fail. If you were ready, we start in the first chamber, the blackening. The first station is not mystical, it's architectural. Aql builds structures, careers, arguments, identities. It categorizes, compares, judges. It keeps you safe until safety becomes a cage. In alchemy, this is nigredo, the blackening, not evil, but the first necessary breakdown, when the old form can no longer hold what the soul is becoming. Attar's Conference of the Birds begins the same way. The hoopoe calls the birds to seek their king, and immediately the excuses arrive. Reasonable, logical, persuasive. The road is too long. I have obligations. I'll lose what I love. Each bird defends its familiar prison with clever speech. That is early intelligence, the mind protecting the persona. Jung named it plainly, the persona, the mask that gets applause. Aql loves the mask because it's legible. It earns status. It avoids shame. But beneath it, denied and pressurized, lives the shadow. Everything you rejected to remain acceptable. Nigredo begins when the mask cracks, when the job title tastes like dust, when your habits repeat like a curse, when you realize your logic can describe the cage perfectly and still can't open the door. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The shadow doesn't disappear because you disapprove of it. It goes underground and starts steering your life from the dark. The habit you can stop, often a bargain with the shadow. The overworking, a polished disguise for fear. The scrolling, a sedative for grief you never metabolized. Aql calls this management. The soul calls it exile. In the old Sufi lodges they warned, when Aql rules alone, it becomes a tyrant, efficient, cold, and convinced it is the whole self. But the human being is not a spreadsheet. You can think your way out of a wound you refuse to feel. This is why Negredo arrives as crisis. Not because life hates you, but because something deeper is trying to rescue you from the persona's prison. The blackening is the moment the inner world stops cooperating with your performance. The secret: you don't beat the shadow by fighting it. You integrate it by seeing what it protects. Shadow work is not moral correction. It's hidden energy recovery. So the first task is not transcend reason. It's humbler. Push reason to its edge until it admits its limit. That admission is the crack where the next intelligence enters. The heart. When Aql reaches its limit, something strange happens. You don't get an answer. You get a silence. And inside that silence, the qalb begins to wake. In Sufi language, qalb is not sentimentality. It's a perceptual organ, a mirror that can reflect what the intellect can hold. In alchemy, this is albedo, the whitening, the first cleansing, the first light after the black storm. There's an old tale from Fez. A student named Salma searched years for a hidden manuscript said to contain the final proof. She finally found a sage who owned it. She begged to read it. The sage opened the chest and removed a blank page. Salma protested. The sage said, "Your mind wanted a weapon, but the heart needs a window. Sit until the page is no longer blank." That is qalb training. Presence over argument. Listening over conquering. You stop hunting meaning like prey and start receiving it like weather. Jung would say this is the threshold where the psyche offers a bridge. Anima animus, the inner other that guides you inward. Not romance, not fantasy. A living function that softens the iron rule of the persona and escorts you into the real interior. Qalb intelligence is ruthless in a new way. It exposes projection. The moment the heart awakens, you notice how often you've been outsourcing your soul. You demand that lovers carry your unlived tenderness. You demand that enemies carry your denied aggression. You demand that strangers online carry your shame, so you can punish it at a distance. Jung's called projection, the mind's oldest trick. I am not like that becomes look at them. But qalb doesn't argue with the projection. It asks, what in me is being refused? This is where habits start to dissolve, not by force, but by retrieval. The craving is rarely the real craving. The addiction is often a displaced prayer. The compulsion is energy that lost its right address. So you begin a practice that sounds simple and feels like surgery. When you were triggered, pause. Name the emotion without a story. Ask, what part of me is knocking from the basement? Then listen long enough for the answer to arrive as sensation, image, memory. This is heart work. It's also shadow work, done with warmth instead of war. And as albedo brightens, the inner world becomes symbolic. Dreams sharpen. Synchronicities cluster. You begin to feel guided, not by superstition, but by a deeper pattern recognition that Aql can compute. And that guidance points forward, beyond heart, into spirit. Ruh. When qalb clears, it becomes a doorway. The Sufis called the next station Ruh, spirit. Not your personal spirit, but the breath of life that moves through everything. In alchemy, this shift is citronatus, the yellowing. Dawn light, solar consciousness, a new kind of seeing. Atar's birds reach the final mountain exhausted. Most have fallen away. The survivors demand the king. And what they encounter is not a throne, but a mirror. They stare and realize the king they sought is not separate from the seeking. The journey burned away the false boundary. This is the shock of Ruh. The ego's fortress is revealed as a useful fiction. You don't become nothing. you become less divided. The me softens. The world feels intimate. The old compulsions weaken because they required a lonely self to defend. Jung's approached this with different symbols. The emergence of the self, not ego, but the organizing center that holds opposites without splitting, where psychology and theology touch. But here is the trap. Touching unity can inflate the ego. People taste the infinite and declare themselves finished. The mystics warn. Fana without baka is spiritual vanity, wearing white robes. So Ra is not escape. It's a more precise engagement with reality. Awake, humbled, and unbearably present. Here the path becomes dangerous in a quiet way. Fana is the annihilation of the false self, the collapse of the rigid. Many touch this in meditation, grief, beauty, or deep love. For a moment the separate self dissolves and there is only presence. But the Sufis immediately add the second word. Baka, subsistence in the eternal. You return. You function. You live. You chop wood and carry water, but from a different center. Because if you don't return properly, the shadow returns wearing light. Jungs would call it inflation. The ego steals the energy of the self and begins to act like a prophet. The person becomes above ordinary morality, above feedback, above relationship. They speak of unity while secretly feeding superiority. So the test of Ra is simple. Are you becoming more humble or more special? More available to others or more numb? More honest or just more spiritual? Real Fana makes you smaller in the right way. Baka makes you useful. If your awakening doesn't change how you treat people when you retired, it's not awakening, it's costume. And when Fana and Baka balance, the final station begins to glow behind everything like a hidden sun. Sirr, the secret. The Sufis called the final station Sirr, the secret. Not a secret you learn. A secret that remains secret even when you are inside it. In alchemy, this is rubedo, the reddening, the philosopher's stone, the resurrection body, the return of life in a new form. Not escape from the world, but transfiguration of the ordinary. Rumi gestures towards Sirr with that famous image, a field beyond wrongdoing and right doing. That field is not moral chaos. It's non-dual awareness. Zen says it differently. No separation between observer and observed. The cup is just the cup. The breath is just the breath. Reality without the narrator. A disciple once asked a master in Damascus, "What changed when you reached the secret?" The master answered, "Nothing changed, but nothing is outside it." Before Sirr, you live inside commentary, regret, planning, judgment, rehearsal. After Sirr, action happens without the extra chain. You still think, but thought is a tool, not a prison. You still feel pain, but pain is not interpreted as punishment. You still have a self, but it's transparent, like a window, not a wall. This is the intelligence beyond reason, not anti-intellectual, post-tyranny. People imagine Sirr as firework, but it's usually quieter. Your attention stops leaking. In the marketplace, emails, bills, temptation. Sirr looks like this. You notice the impulse before it becomes motion. The cigarette, the doom scroll, the sarcastic reply. And instead of obeying it or suppressing it, you witness it like weather passing through a wide sky. This is where the tyranny of reason finally relaxes. Aql no longer argues with the craving. Qalb listens underneath it. Ra remembers you are not the craving. Sirr lets the moment be complete without needing a numbing ritual. A Sufi teacher once said the sign of progress is not visions. It's shorter recovery time. You still fall into old patterns, but you return faster. The gap widens between trigger and reaction. In that gap, you choose. This is baka in practice. You return to ordinary life, but from the secret. You still chop wood and carry water. Only now, the chopping is not a distraction from life. It is life. And relationships change first. Because you stop demanding others complete what you refuse to integrate. The anonymous becomes an inner ally, not a hunger projected onto lovers. The shadow becomes a teacher, not a saboteur. Now the practical question. How do you train these stations without turning them into another performance? Think in layers like an alchemical vessel. 1. Aql practices, negredo. Push clarity until it exposes the lie. Track your habits like a scientist. When, where, what emotion precedes them. Write the pattern. Don't moralize. Observe. The goal is to see the cage precisely. 2. Qalb practices, albedo. Daily stillness, but not empty your mind. Instead, feel the body. Name what's present. Grief, heat, tightness, longing. Let sensation speak. This is heart literacy. Add one act of honest tenderness per day toward yourself or another. Ra practices, citrinitas. Dhikr is the classic Sufi technology, repetition that shifts identity from I think to I am. If that language is yours, use breath prayer, mantra, or simple awareness practice. The point is remembrance, returning to the witness. Sirr practices, rubedo. Paradoxically, you can do, sir. You become available to it by dropping spiritual ambition. Serve. Create without applause. Do one ordinary task with total presence, no commentary. Jung's mirror here is active imagination. Dialogue with inner figures, not to entertain them, but to integrate their energy. Shadow work is where most people either quit or become real. Start with this. The shadow is not just bad. It's life force you locked away to stay lovable, safe, impressive. The shadow holds rage you weren't allowed to feel, desire you were taught to shame, power you feared would corrupt you. A precise method. When a trigger hits someone's success, rejection, disrespect, don't ask, why are they like that? Ask, 1. Exactly did I feel? Name it cleanly. 2. Where is it in my body? Tight throat, burning chest. 3. What story did my mind attach? I'm nothing, they were evil. 4. What trait am I seeing that I disown in myself? What is the healthy form of that trait? Anger my boundaries. This is integration. Not becoming worse, but becoming whole. Jung's goal was sainthood. It was wholeness. And Sufism agrees. Purification is about pretending you were pure. Is about removing the veil that forces you to split. Here's the occult fact hidden in plain sight. What you repress controls you. What you integrate serves you. Habits weaken when the exiled part finally has a seat at the table. Anima animus work is where the heart truly opens, because it ends the hunger to be completed from outside. Jung's noticed, when the inner feminine, anima, or inner masculine, animus, is unconscious, we project it onto lovers, gurus, enemies. We don't see the person, we see our missing piece. That's why obsession feels fated. It's not fate. Is internal exile seeking reunion. Qalb integration looks like this. You stop expecting a partner to be your oxygen. You stop needing admiration to feel real. You stop confusing intensity with truth. A Sufi saying puts it bluntly. Do not drink from a cup that leaks. If your inner cup is cracked, you will drain people. So you reclaim the projection. If you crave a mysterious, nurturing presence, ask, where is my own tenderness? If you crave a strong, decisive guide, ask, where is my own authority? Then practice the trait internally. Write from that voice. Walk as that energy. Protect your boundaries. Create beauty. Speak truth. The projected figure becomes an inner ally, and love becomes cleaner. Less spell, more seeing. This is heart intelligence maturing. And when Qalb and Anima Animus integrate, Ruh stabilizes. The spiritual path stops being escape and becomes embodiment. Now you can see the whole map as one continuous operation, the magnum opus of consciousness. Nigredo. Aql. The mind discovers its limits. Persona cracks. Shadow appears. Albedo Qalb. The heart becomes mirror. Feeling becomes guidance, not weakness. Citrinitas. Ruh. Spirit dawns. Non-separation is tasted. The self organizes the psyche. Rubedo. Sir. The secret is lived. Ordinary life becomes luminous without effort. Attar dramatized it with birds crossing valleys. Jung's mapped it through the psyche. The Sufis mapped it through stations of the soul. These are not competing systems. They are different languages describing the same transformation, from fragmentation to integration, from compulsion to freedom. And notice what freedom means here. Not doing whatever you want, but no longer being dragged by what you don't understand. Your bad habits are not random sins. They are signals from an unmapped interior. When you learn the map, the signals change. The craving becomes information. The trigger becomes a doorway. The shadow becomes fuel. The heart becomes intelligent. So the question becomes simple. Which station are you actually living in today? Start there. Don't cosplay the summit. The path is sequential for a reason. So here is the ending, and it is also the beginning. If you are stuck in Aql, don't rush to visions. Let your certainty collapse honestly. Let Nigredo do its work. If your heart is waking, don't numb it. Let Albedo cleanse the mirror. If Ruh has begun to breathe through you, stay humble. Balance Fana with Baka. And if you've touched the secret, don't advertise it. Live it. Because the real proof is not in your vocabulary. Is in your reflexes. How you speak when you're tired. What you do when no one applauds. Whether you can sit with discomfort without bargaining for escape. Tonight you were given a map that most people will never see, not because it's hidden, but because it demands something the rational mind hates, surrender of control. And maybe you felt it, quietly, beneath the words. A small stirring in the chest, a recognition older than your personality. That is Qalb remembering. The question is not whether you are capable. The architecture is already inside you. The question is whether you will stop searching in the bright streets for what can only be found in the dim inner house.